Hey guys, tonight we slip through the creaky wooden doors of medieval Europe, where candlelight flickers against stone walls and the air smells of straw and secrets. You're standing in a dimly lit chamber, the kind where nobles and peasants alike shared their most private moments. The topic, what intimacy was really like in the Middle Ages, raw, awkward, and tangled in rules you'd probably never survive. From lumpy straw mattresses to whispered scandals, we're peeling back the tapestry on a world where love, lust, and survival danced a complicated jig. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and the time where you are. I love knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into a medieval bedroom and it's not the romantic scene you might imagine. The air is thick with the scent of damp wool and herbs, scattered to mask the less pleasant odors. Most homes, even noble ones, had one or two rooms where everyone family servants, sometimes livestock, piled in for the night. Privacy, a luxury. You're lucky if a thin curtain or a wooden screen separates your bed from the rest of the household. Beds themselves varied wildly. Peasants may do with straw-stuffed sacks on the floor, itchy and crawling with the occasional flea. Nobles had four-poster beds with heavy curtains, not for romance but to keep out drafts and prying eyes. Mainstream fact, these curtain beds, called tester beds, were status symbols often listed in wills as prized possessions. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval folks believed sleeping too comfortably could invite demonic visitors. Soft mattresses, suspiciously sinful. So you might prop yourself up on a hard bolster, half sitting to ward off spiritual intruders. Imagine trying to get cozy while worrying about a demon crashing your nap talk about a mood killer. Historians still argue whether these sleeping habits were purely practical or tied to deeper superstitions about vulnerability in sleep. You fumble with the bedclothes, coarse linen sheets if you're lucky, furs if you're rich. The room's cold even in summer because windows are small and glass is rare. You might share the bed with your spouse, a sibling, or even a stranger if you're at an inn. Personal space wasn't a thing. You're hyper-aware of every creak in the house, every rustle from the other side of the curtain. Intimacy in this setting feels like a stolen act, squeezed between survival and scrutiny. And don't get me started on the noise. Snoring servants, barking dogs, maybe a cow lowing in the corner. Romantic, right? Let's talk lighting. Candles made from tallow, that's animal fat, give off a smoky, meaty smell. Beeswax candles, cleaner and sweeter, are for the elite. You're probably too poor for either, so you make do with a rushlight. A reed dipped in grease that spits and sputters, setting the mood. More like praying the house doesn't catch fire. Joke number 1. If your medieval date night includes a rushlight, you're basically flirting with Arson. You notice the walls often bare, but sometimes draped with tapestries in wealthier homes. These aren't just decor, they're insulation against the damp. Some depict biblical scenes, others hunting or romance. A constant reminder of the stories shaping how you're supposed to act. You might feel a pang of guilt if your thoughts wander too far. Those woven saints are watching. The floors packed earth or scattered with rushes which haven't been changed in weeks. Crunchy underfoot and not in a good way. Physical closeness in these cramped quarters wasn't always about desire. Warmth mattered more than passion. You huddle close to whoever's sharing the bed, not because you're feeling frisky but because it's freezing. Yet, in these shared spaces, moments of tenderness or temptation still found a way. You whisper to your partner, careful not to wake the kids. or the servant snoring nearby. Every touch feels like a risk. Every giggle, a potential scandal. Joke number 2, medieval foreplay, probably included checking the bed for stray chickens. Seriously, livestock in the house wasn't uncommon. You're trying to steal a kiss. And the goats chewing your blanket. The lack of privacy shaped how people approached intimacy, quiet, and always with an ear out for interruptions. Even in noble households, servants might sleep at the foot of the bed. You learn to carve out closeness in the margins, a skill modern couples might envy. As you settle into the lumpy bed, you realize this space, flawed as it is where medieval life unfolded, birth, love, death, all under one roof. The bedroom wasn't just for sleeping. It was a microcosm of survival status and stolen moments. You pulled the blanket tighter, wondering how anyone found romance in this chaos. But they did, and that's the magic we're chasing tonight. You step out of the cramped, straw-scented bedroom and into the shimmering world of courtly love, where poetry and longing weave a delicate dance. You're in a noble's hall, now surrounded by tapestries and the soft strum of a lute. The air buzzes with whispered verses as knights and ladies exchange glances that carry more weight than words. This isn't the gritty reality of peasant life. It's a game of romance, bound by rules so intricate you'd need a manual to keep up. Courtly love, that medieval mix of devotion and desire, shapes how the elite flirt, pine, and occasionally fumble their way into each other's hearts, or at least pretend to. Mainstream fact courtly love emerged in 12th century France, popularized by poets like Chrétien de Troyes, who spun tales of knights serving their ladies with near-religious fervor. You're expected to dedicate yourself to a noblewoman often married and out of reach, proving your worth through heroic deeds or heartfelt verse. It's less about physical intimacy and more about emotional obsession, a kind of romantic cosplay where everyone's playing a role. You pen a poem praising her eyes, comparing them to stars or some equally over-the-top metaphor. If you're lucky, she might toss you a ribbon or a coy smile, and that's your reward for now. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some courts had courts of love, where noblewomen supposedly judged disputes over romantic etiquette, like whether a knight's love was pure enough. Picture a medieval reality show with ladies sipping wine and debating if Sir So-and-so's sonnet was swoon-worthy. Were these courts real or just literary fluff? Historians still argue whether they actually happened or were a poetic fantasy, cooked up to spice up the troubadour's tales. You're a knight, let's say, clad in a tunic that's fancier than practical. You've sworn to serve your lady, but it's not as simple as sliding into her DMs. First, you've got to perform. Maybe you joust in her honor, risking a concussion to prove your devotion. Or you compose a song performed in the Great Hall, while everyone pretends not to notice the subtext. The rules are strict, your love must be chaste. At least in public, your loyalty unwavering and your manners impeccable. Sneeze during her favorite ballad and your toast. Joke number 1, courtly love's so formal, you'd need a flowchart to ask for a date. The lady, meanwhile, holds all the power, or so the poems claim. She's your muse, your judge, your unattainable star. You're supposed to worship her from afar, but the tension's palpable. Those stolen glances across the banquet table. They're electric, but crossing the line could ruin you both. Adultery was a sin, and noble women's reputations were fragile. You're caught in a paradox. The more you desire her, the more you're supposed to restrain yourself. It's like medieval edging, but with higher stakes and worse hygiene. Let's talk setting. The hall's alive with color banners, embroidered cushions, and the glint of silver goblets. You smell roasted meat and spiced wine, but the floors still strewn with rushes crunching under your boots. Servants bustle, musicians play, and you're hyper-aware of every move you make. Privacy's still a myth. Even your most heartfelt poem is overheard by nosy courtiers. You whisper your verses to your lady's maid, hoping she'll pass them along, but there's always a risk of gossip. Joke number 2, sending a love note in medieval times, might as well post it on the village square. The church looms over this whole charade. Courtly love's obsession with desire flirts dangerously with sin, and priests aren't thrilled. You're supposed to channel that passion into serving God, or your Lord, not mooning over Lady Eleanor's smile. Yet the poets lean into the tension blending spiritual and romantic devotion until it's hard to tell them apart. You might compare your lady to the Virgin Mary, which sounds sweet, but could get you a stern lecture from the local bishop. The line between sacred and scandalous is razor thin. For all its rules, courtly love isn't always pure. Some knights and ladies took it beyond poetry, risking everything for a secret rendezvous. You hear rumors of hidden alcoves behind tapestries where whispered promises turn into something more. But the consequences are brutal banishment, disgrace, or worse. You weigh every word, every gesture, knowing one misstep could unravel the delicate game. And let's be honest, the poetry's not always Shakespeare. Some of it's so cheesy you'd cringe harder than at a bad Tinder bio. Joke number 3, if your courtly love poem rhymes heart with fart, you're probably not winning her favor. The skill was in the delivery. Confidence could sell even the clunkiest verse. You practice your lines hoping to impress, but the pressure's on. Everyone's watching from the Lord to the lowliest page. Courtly love's a performance, a way to climb the social ladder while looking noble. You're not just wooing her, you're wooing an audience. As you step back from the hall, the lute's melody fading, you realize courtly love was less about real romance and more about crafting an ideal. It's a world of longing where words and gestures carry the weight of desire, and the rules keep everyone just out of reach. You tuck your parchment away, wondering how anyone kept their heart intact in this glittering, frustrating game. You leave the polished halls of courtly love behind, trading tapestries and lutes for the earthy grit of a peasant's life. You're trudging through a muddy village now, the air thick with wood smoke and the tang of freshly turned soil. Chickens cluck underfoot and the horizon glows with the last light of a long day's labor. Here, among the thatched huts and endless chores, you uncover how rural folk found time for passion amid the grind of survival. Love in the fields isn't bound by poetic rules, it's raw, practical, and woven into the rhythm of sowing, reaping, and stealing moments under the stars. Mainstream fact: most medieval Europeans were peasants, tied to the land and working from dawn to dusk, with marriage often serving as an economic partnership. You're likely wed young, chosen by your family to strengthen ties with another household. Your spouse isn't just a lover, but a teammate. Together you plow fields, tend livestock, and keep the heart burning. Intimacy isn't a luxury. It's a necessity, producing children to help with chores and secure the family's future. Love, if it blooms, grows in the margins of this hardscrabble life. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed in hand-fasting, an informal betrothal, where you'd clasp hands and pledge love under a tree, no priest required. It was a way to test the waters before committing, like medieval dating with a side of rebellion. Historians still argue whether hand-fasting was legally binding or just a romantic custom that annoyed the church. You're in a one-room hut, the fire casting shadows on wattle and daub walls. The bed's a straw pallet shared with your spouse and maybe a toddler or two. Privacy, forget it. The kids, the in-laws, even a curious goat might be nearby. You steal moments when the house quiets the crackle of the fire, your only cover. It's not glamorous, but there's a warmth to it. Your partner's calloused hand, brushing yours, a shared laugh over a stubborn cow. Joke number 1, peasant romance, means wooing her while she's milking a goat and hoping the goat doesn't kick you first. The seasons dictate your life and they shape your affections too. Spring planting brings long days in the fields where you and your beloved work side by side, sweat mixing with shy glances. Harvest season's busier, but the village feast afterward might give you a chance to dance your clogs, thumping on the dirt. Winter's your best bet for closeness. Shorter work days mean more time by the fire where stories and touches keep the cold at bay. You're not reciting poetry like those fancy knights, but you've got your own charm, maybe a whittled token, or a sprig of wildflowers tucked into her hair. The church ever-present casts a shadow here too. You're told intimacy is for procreation, not pleasure, and priests love to lecture about sin. But out in the fields, far from the chapel, you're more practical. You love as you live directly without fanfare. Still, you're careful. Gossip spreads fast in a village, and a jealous neighbor might tattle to the priest. You keep your flirtations subtle, a nudge during the haymaking or a whispered joke at the well. Joke number 2. If your medieval pickup line is nice pitchfork, you're probably not sweeping her off her feet. But humor's your currency. You tease her about her uneven bread loaves, and she fires back about your muddy boots. It's not courtly, but it's real. The village is your stage, and every shared chore is a chance to connect. You might sneak a kiss behind the barn, the smell of hay and leather wrapping around you like a secret. Nature's your backdrop, and it's not always kind. Rain turns your path to sludge, and a bad harvest means lean nights with no energy for romance. Yet there's beauty in the ordinary. You watch her braid her hair by candlelight, the same hands that churn butter now soft in yours. These moments, fleeting as they are, stitch your lives together. Children come quickly, too quickly sometimes, and they're both a blessing and a burden. You dream of a bigger hut, maybe a cow of your own, but for now, her smile's enough. Community shapes your love as much as labor does. Village life is tight-knit, and everyone's in your business. You court her publicly under the eyes of nosy elders, maybe during a May Day dance, where you weave ribbons and dodge matchmaking aunts. Weddings are raucous with ale and bawdy songs, but they're also contracts. You're not just gaining a wife, you're merging families, land, and livestock. Joke number 3. A peasant's dowry might include 2 chickens and a really good shovel, true love medieval style. As you settle by the fire, the embers glowing like the last of your energy, you realize peasant love is resilience. It's not about grand gestures, but about showing up day after muddy day. You pull her close, the straw creaking beneath you, and the world feels smaller, warmer. Remember that crowded bedroom from the noble's house. Out here, it's just as cramped, but the stakes feel different. Less about status, more about survival. You drift off, wondering how these hard-working hearts found space for passion, and what lessons they might whisper to us now. You step from the muddy village, where peasant love bloomed in stolen glances, into the shadow of the church, its stone walls looming like a stern parent. The scent of incense and damp earth fills your nose as you stand in a candlelit chapel, the flicker of votive flames casting judgment. Here, the clergy's iron grip clamps down on every aspect of intimacy, dictating what you can feel, when, and with whom. The medieval church isn't just a spiritual guide, it's the ultimate gatekeeper of your private life, armed with sermons, confessions, and a long list of sins. You're about to learn how faith shaped desire and how people navigated the tightrope between devotion and defiance. Mainstream fact: the Catholic Church in medieval Europe held immense power enforcing strict rules on physical intimacy through canon law, which deemed it acceptable only within marriage and primarily for procreation. You're taught that any deviation, Whether it's pleasure for its own sake or heaven, forbid an extramarital fling, is a fast track to eternal torment. Priests preach from pulpits about the dangers of lust, urging you to keep your thoughts pure. You're expected to confess every wayward glance, every fleeting desire, to a priest who might scold you or assign penance like fasting or extra prayers. The church's rules are clear. Your body belongs to God, not you. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval penitential manuals guides for priests hearing confessions included oddly specific questions about intimate acts, like whether you used unnatural positions. Imagine blushing in a drafty confessional while Father Bernard grills you on bedroom logistics. Talk about awkward. Historians still argue whether these manuals reflected real practices or were just the church's attempt to micromanage every corner of life. You're kneeling in the pews, the cold stone biting through your thin hose. The priest's voice echoes, warning of hellfire for those who stray. You glance at your spouse, sitting beside you, and wonder how you're supposed to balance the church's demands with the messy reality of human connection. Marriage is sacred, sure, but it's also practical. You need heirs, labor stability. The church says intimacy is fine, within those bounds, but only just. You're supposed to approach it like a duty, not a delight. Joke number 1. Medieval romance under church rules. It's like filing taxes but with more guilt and fewer refunds. The calendar adds another layer of control. You can't just cozy up whenever you feel like it. There are forbidden times. Lent, Advent Sundays, and major feast days are off limits, which cuts out half the year. You're supposed to abstain during pregnancy or menstruation too, because the church has opinions on everything. You sneak a look at the stained glass windows, their saints, glaring down, and wonder how anyone keeps track. Some couples ignore the rules, but you're risking a neighbor's gossip or a priest's suspicion. Confessions mandatory, and you dread the moment you have to mumble your sins through a wooden grill. Yet the church isn't all restrictions. It also sanctifies love, giving it a framework. You married in a church doorway, your vows sealed with a ring and a blessing. That ceremony ties you to your spouse in the eyes of God, and there's comfort in that. You feel it now, your hand brushing theirs as you leave the chapel, the weight of shared promises grounding you. But the church's obsession with control creates tension. You hear whispers of couples defying the rules, meeting in secret haylofts, or slipping into the woods. The risk is huge: excommunication or public penance, like standing in a white sheet outside the church. Still, desire finds a way. Joke number 2. The church says no intimacy on Sundays, so you spend the day polishing your halo instead. The rules shape not just actions but attitudes. You're taught to see your body as a battleground where sin and virtue duke it out. This makes intimacy a mental minefield. You love your spouse, but every touch comes with a side of guilt, especially if you enjoy it a little too much. Priests don't help with their sermons about Eve's temptation or the dangers of immoderate affection. You roll your eyes but keep quiet. Questioning the church isn't a great career move. The clergy themselves aren't always models of virtue. You've heard rumors about priests with mistresses or monks sneaking into taverns. The church cracks down hard on clerical misconduct, but it happens and it fuels your quiet cynicism. If the rules are so sacred, why do even holy men bend them? You push the thought aside, focusing on the priest's drone in Latin. The community watches you too. Village busybodies love reporting immoral behavior. You learn to keep your private moments private, a skill honed in those crowded huts we talked about earlier. Joke number 3. Confessing a crush in medieval times. You're basically snitching on yourself to God's HR department. The church's grip extends beyond the bedroom, shaping how you see love itself. It's a gift, but only if you follow the manual. You leave the chapel the night air cool against your face, and feel the tension between what you're told and what you want. The stars above don't judge, but the weight of those rules lingers. You wonder how many others slipping into their straw beds tonight are wrestling with the same quiet rebellion, finding ways to love. Despite the church's watchful eyes, you slip away from the chapel's heavy incense and stern saints, stepping into the opulent world of noble marriages, where love is less a feeling and more a contract. You're in a grand castle now, its stone walls hung with vibrant tapestries, the air sharp with the scent of polished wood and spiced wine. Servants bustle carrying silver trays, while lords and ladies murmur behind velvet curtains. Here, in the private negotiations of arranged unions, you peek into the delicate dance of power duty and occasional desire. These marriages aren't about stolen kisses, but about forging alliances, securing lands, and ensuring legacies, though sometimes a spark of affection sneaks through the cracks. Mainstream fact in medieval Europe, noble marriages were strategic alliances often arranged when the bride and groom were children to strengthen political or economic ties between families. You're a young noble, maybe 15, meeting your betrothed for the first time. She's from a rival house. Her dowry a swath of fertile land or a hefty pile of gold. Your parents sealed the deal years ago, and your job is to make it work. The wedding's a spectacle, feasts, jousts, and vows, sworn before a bishop. But the real work happens later in the quiet moments where you navigate this stranger who's now your lifelong partner. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some noble couples used bedding ceremonies where witnesses escorted you to the marriage bed to confirm the union was consummated. Imagine a gaggle of tipsy relatives cheering you on while you try to keep a straight-faced privacy was not invited to the party. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were common or mostly symbolic, reserved for high-stakes royal matches. You're standing in a candlelit chamber, the massive tester bed from that first night looming behind you. The curtains are drawn, but you're not alone. Servants linger, and your new spouse's attendants are probably eavesdropping. You're nervous not just about the night ahead, but about the years to come. She's poised, her embroidered gown stiff with status, but her eyes betray a flicker of uncertainty. You're supposed to produce heirs, cement the alliance, and avoid embarrassing your family. No pressure, right? Joke number 1, a noble's wedding night. It's like a board meeting, but with fancier clothes and worse lighting. The negotiations didn't end at the altar. You're constantly bargaining over household duties, her dower rights, even how to handle her meddling relatives. She brings her own entourage, maids and knights who watch your every move. You learn to read her silences, her subtle gestures, because open affection isn't the norm. Some couples grow to love each other, but it's a slow burn built on shared goals rather than passion. You might gift her a jeweled brooch not out of romance, but to signal loyalty to her father's house. Every move is political even in the bedroom. The church's rules, those ironclad dictates we wrestled with in the chapel, still apply. You're expected to be fruitful, but only within the sacred bounds of marriage. Yet nobles have more wiggle room than peasants. You can afford separate chambers, a rare slice of privacy, though it's more for status than intimacy. You hear rumors of other lords keeping mistresses, but that's a risky game. Your wife's family won't take kindly to slights, and the church loves a scandal. You tread carefully, balancing duty with the human need for connection. Joke number 2, noble foreplay. Negotiating who gets the better side of the bed diplomacy at its finest. The bed itself is a symbol of your union, draped in silks and embroidered with your family's crest. It's where alliances are sealed, but it's also where you confront the reality of your partner. She's not the poetic muse of courtly love or the hard-working peasant wife. She's a political player as invested in this marriage's success as you are. You talk late into the night not of love but of strategy, how to outmaneuver rival lord or secure a royal favor. These conversations, dry as they sound, build a strange intimacy. Children are the goal and the pressure's intense. You feel it from your advisors, her ladies, even the priest who blesses your union. A son means stability. A daughter, a bargaining chip for another marriage. You're hyper-aware of the stakes every time you draw those bed curtains. Failure to produce an heir could unravel the alliance, and whispers of infertility, hers or yours, spread like wildfire. You push the thought aside, focusing on the moment her hand cool against yours. The room's quiet now, the servants finally gone, and you find a fragile trust in the shared weight of your roles. Joke number 3. Noble marriages are so strategic, you half expect a chessboard under the pillow. The truth is, some couples find warmth in this arranged life. You catch her laughing at a feast, her wit sharper than your sword, and feel a stir of something real. Other unions stay cold, two strangers bound by duty, their true desires buried under layers of protocol. You hear of lords who pine for their courtly muses or ladies who charm visiting knights a bit too boldly. Infidelity's a landmine, but it happens and you're learning to spot the signs. Her sudden interest in falconry might not be about birds. As you settle into the rhythm of this marriage, the castle's bustle fading to a distant hum, you realize a noble love is a chess game with human hearts. It's not the raw passion of the village or the poetic longing of the hall, but it has its own quiet fire. You glance at her asleep, now her face soft in the candlelight, and wonder if duty might one day feel like devotion. For now you pull the furs closer, the weight of your shared future heavier than any blanket. You ease away from the castle's heavy tapestries and whispered alliances, stepping into a dimly lit apothecary shop, its shelves crammed with jars of herbs and curious powders. The air hums with the scent of crushed lavender, pungent roots, and something faintly metallic like old coins. You're here to test medieval recipes for sparking desire, aphrodisiacs, and charms that promise to kindle passion in even the weariest heart. From noble bedchambers to peasant huts, people turn to potions, amulets, and whispered spells to nudge love along, often with results as unpredictable as a summer storm. You're about to mix sip and maybe raise an eyebrow at what passed for romance fuel in the Middle Ages. Mainstream fact: medieval Europeans widely believed certain foods and herbs could boost desire, drawing on ancient medical texts like those of Galen, which linked bodily humors to passion. You're handed a goblet of wine, laced with saffron, a spice pricier than gold, thought to warm the blood and stir the senses. Nobles swore by it, sprinkling it into stews, or slipping it into their beloved's drink. Peasants, unable to afford such luxuries, chewed on wild herbs like vervain or savory, plucked from hedgerows and trusted to spark a flame. These remedies weren't just superstition. They were rooted in a worldview where diet shaped both health and heart. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval love charms involve downright bizarre ingredients like powdered deer antler or, yes, dried bat blood believed to bind a lover's soul to yours. Picture you sneaking into a moonlit forest to collect bat droppings for a charm, hoping it'll make your crush swoon. Historians still argue whether these odd recipes were taken seriously. or were more symbolic, a way to channel desperate hopes into something tangible. You're standing at a scarred wooden table, a mortar and pestle before you. The apothecary, a wiry woman with ink-stained fingers, hands you a recipe, scrawled on vellum mix, honey, crushed almonds, and a pinch of mandrake root. Then whisper your beloved's name over it. Mandrake, with its human-shaped roots, was a star in medieval magic, thought to ignite passion, but also dangerously toxic if you overdid it. You grind the ingredients, the sweet stickiness of honey clinging to your fingers, and wonder if this potion's more likely to win a heart or send someone to the healer. Joke number 1. Medieval aphrodisiacs. Half the time you're brewing a love potion. The other half, you're just seasoning soup. The church, that ever-watchful shadow from the chapel, doesn't love this stuff. Love charms skate close to witchcraft, and priests warn that tampering with free will invites the devil. You're careful to keep your potion-making quiet, maybe slipping the apothecary a few extra coins to hush her up. But the line between medicine and magic is blurry. You hear of women baking love cakes with secret herbs, slipping them to husbands who've grown distant. Men, too, seek out charms, amulets carved with runes, or prayers worn under tunics to boost their charm. It's not just about physical desire. It's about connection in a world where survival often trumps sentiment. Let's talk setting. The shop's cramped, its walls hung with dried herbs and strange talismans, a rabbit's foot, a polished stone set to glow under moonlight. The fire crackles, casting shadows that make the jars seem alive. You're not alone. A nervous young man hovers nearby, asking for a charm to win a baker's daughter. The apothecary winks, slipping him a sachet of rose petals and something she won't name. You catch the scent of cloves, sharp and warm, and feel a flicker of hope. Maybe these old tricks work, or maybe it's just the belief that does the trick. Joke number 2. If your love potion smells like old socks, you might be doing it wrong, or you've invented medieval cologne. The recipes vary wildly. Some call for practical ingredients, oysters believed to mimic the body's own heat, or eggs, symbols of fertility. Others lean mystical, a lock of your hair tied with a red thread and buried under an oak. You try one, knotting the thread with a whispered wish, and feel a bit silly, but also oddly empowered. These charms are less about chemistry and more about intention, a way to wrest control. In a world of arranged marriages and rigid rules, the risks are real. A botched potion could sicken someone, and a charm gone wrong might spark gossip. You hear of a noblewoman exiled for slipping a love draft to a rival's husband. Turns out it was just bad wine, but the scandal stuck. You're cautious, sticking to safer recipes like a tea of chamomile and mint, said to soothe nerves and open hearts. It's not as flashy as mandrake, but it's less likely to land you in a dungeon. The apothecary warns you to trust your instincts, love. She says, can't be forced, only invited. Joke number 3. Medieval love spells, like swiping right but with more frogs and fewer filters. As you leave the shop, the sachet of herbs tucked in your pouch, you feel the weight of those old hopes. These potions and charms, strange as they seem, were a bridge between the heart and the harsh world, a way to dream of closeness. Despite the odds, you think back to the noble's bed, the peasant's fire, the church's glare, each shaping desire in its own way. Now, with a pinch of magic in your pocket, you wonder if love's spark is less about ingredients and more about the courage to try. You step out of the apothecary's herb-scented haze, leaving behind potions and whispered charms, and into the stark reality of a medieval village street where the air carries the sharp whiff of sweat and livestock. The sun beats down and you notice the grime under your nails, the itch of unwashed wool against your skin. Hygiene, or the lack of it, is your new focus, and it's a harsh truth that shapes every intimate moment in this world. Bathing's a rare luxury and cleanliness is more a hope than a habit. You're about to grapple with how medieval folks managed desire when soap was a myth and fresh water was a gamble, and how they still found ways to connect despite the aromatic challenges. Mainstream fact bathing was uncommon in medieval Europe, especially among the lower classes due to limited access to clean water and the high cost of heating it, with many people washing only a few times a year. You're a peasant, maybe splashing your face from a bucket. If the well's not too far, but a full bath, that's for feast days or never. Nobles fare better with portable wooden tubs and servants to hold hot water, but even they might go weeks without a soak. The church doesn't help sometimes, preaching that excessive washing is vain or sinful, though they're fine with ritual cleansing before Mass. Hygiene's a logistical nightmare and you're living in its gritty reality. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval folks used strewing herbs like lavender or rosemary, scattered on floors or tucked into clothes to mask body odor. Think of it as the world's first air freshener. You're stuffing a sprig of mint into your tunic, hoping it distracts from the fact that you smell like last week's stew. Historians still argue whether these herbs were effective or just a desperate attempt to fend off the inevitable funk. You're in a crowded hut, the same straw-filled space from that peasant village, and the air's a mix of smoke, sweat, and yesterday's cabbage. You share this space with your family, maybe a cousin or two, and there's no escaping the collective aroma. Bathing means hauling water from a stream, heating it over a fire, and hoping nobody needs the bucket for something else. Most days you settle for a quick wipe with a damp cloth focusing on your face and hands. Your hair's a tangle, matted with dust, and your clothes haven't seen a wash since spring. Joke number 1, medieval date night prep. You dunk your head in a trough and call it high fashion. Nobles like those in that castle marriage have it easier, but not by much. You picture their tub lined with linen to avoid splinters filled with rose-scented water. It's a status symbol like their tester beds, but it's still a production servants lugging buckets up, winding stairs, the water cooling, before you're halfway clean. You hear of public bathhouses in cities where men and women mingle in steamy rooms, but they're rare in rural areas and carry a whiff of scandal. The church frowns on mixed bathing and rumors swirl about what really happens in those tubs. You stick to your bucket, safer but less exciting. Teeth are another hurdle. You've got no toothbrush, just a twig or a cloth to scrub with maybe some chalk or salt if you're fancy. Bad breath is a given, and you're lucky if your teeth last past 30. You chew on cloves or fennel seeds, a trick borrowed from that apothecary shelf. But it's like putting a bandage on a broken cart. Intimacy in this world means getting close. Despite the grit, your partner's smile is warm, but you both know not to breathe too deeply. Joke number 2, medieval flirting. It's locking eyes while pretending you don't smell like a barnyard. The lack of hygiene shapes how you approach closeness. You're hyper-aware of your body not out of vanity but necessity. Lice and fleas are constant roommates, and you spend evenings picking them off each other, a strangely intimate act in itself. You laugh with your spouse as you flick a bug into the fire, turning a chore into a shared moment. Desire doesn't pause for cleanliness. You find beauty in the familiar, in the way her hands move, or his laugh cuts through the evening's quiet. The church's rules, those rigid edicts from the chapel, fade a bit. In these moments, though, you still worry about sinning too enthusiastically. Water's the real issue. Rivers and streams are often shared with laundry, livestock, and worse. You've heard of plagues linked to bad water, so you're wary of dunking yourself in just anything. Some believe bathing opens your pores to disease. A theory from those ancient medical texts we'll visit later. You compromise washing your feet before bed, a small ritual that feels like luxury. The wealthy might boast of aqueducts or private wells, but you're at the mercy of nature and time. Joke number 3, medieval hygiene. You're basically speed dating with a bucket and a prayer. As you settle into the hut's dim glow, the fire crackling softly, you realize hygiene's absence didn't stop. Love it just made it more human. You think back to the noble's perfume bath, the peasant's muddy fields, the apothecary's fragrant herbs, each a piece of this messy tactile world. Intimacy here is defiance, a choice. To embrace someone despite the dirt and doubt. You pull your cloak tighter, the faint scent of mint lingering, and wonder how these unwashed hearts found the courage to lean in. Close night after gritty night, you wander from the grimy village street where hygiene was more a dream than a reality into a quiet corner of a healer's hut, its air heavy with the scent of dried herbs and wax. A flickering candle casts shadows on a table, strewn with strange tools, bone needles, clay pots, and a tattered manuscript of medical lore. You're here to examine the bizarre world of medieval contraception, where couples try to manage family size with methods that range from clever to downright wacky. In a time when children were both a blessing and a burden, you uncover the odd techniques people use to plan their futures, balancing desire with the harsh math of survival. Mainstream fact: medieval contraception existed, often rooted in herbal knowledge passed down through midwives and healers as large families strained resources, especially for peasants. You're a young wife, maybe already with 2 babes clinging to your skirts, seeking a way to space out the next one. The healer hands you a pouch of rue and pennyroyal herbs, thought to prevent pregnancy if brewed into a bitter tea. You're told to drink it sparingly, it's potent and can sicken you if you overdo it. These remedies, drawn from ancient texts like the Trotula, a 12th century women's health manual, were a lifeline for those who could afford them. But here's a quirky tidbit: some medieval contraception methods leaned hard into the absurd, like amulets made from a weasel's testicles, worn around the neck to ward off conception. Yes, you're picturing it, right, swinging a furry charm, like a medieval talisman of not yet. Historians still argue whether these were serious practices or folklore, half believed by desperate couples, and scoffed at by skeptics. You're sitting on a low stool, the healer's voice soft but firm as she explains your options. The tea's your best bet, but it tastes like regret and leaves your stomach churning. Other methods float around whispered among women at the well. Some swear by a paste of cedar gum and barley, applied in ways you'd rather not dwell on, meant to block the body's natural course. Others talk of timing, avoiding certain days in your cycle. A method as old as the stars, but tricky without a calendar. You listen, weighing the risk, knowing a mistake could mean another mouth to feed or a dangerous trip back to this hut. The church, that looming presence from the chapel days, cast a long shadow here. Contraception's a sin, plain and simple. Any attempt to thwart God's will risks your soul. You're supposed to welcome every child, no matter how lean the harvest. But survival's a louder voice than sermons. You've seen families buckle under the weight of too many little ones, their grain stores dwindling by spring. You slip the herb pouch into your apron, vowing to keep it secret even from your husband. Confessions a worry, priests ask pointed questions, and you're not keen on explaining yourself to Father Cedric's raised eyebrow. Let's talk tools. The healer shows you a linen cloth, soaked in vinegar and used as a barrier, a crude but practical trick. It's uncomfortable and you're not sure it works, but it's better than nothing. Wealthier women like those noble brides might consult physicians who prescribe costly concoctions. Silphium, a now extinct plant, was once prized for its contraceptive powers. You're stuck with local plants, their names, half-forgotten songs, tansy, wild carrot, mugwort. Each carries a warning too much, and you're not just preventing a baby but risking your life. Joke number 1. Medieval birth control. It's like playing herbal roulette with extra side effects. Men have their methods too, though they're less reliable. You hear of withdrawal, a practice as old as scripture and just as chancy. Some men wear sheaths made of animal gut, tied with a ribbon, like a grim gift wrap. But they're rare and mostly for the rich. You roll your eyes, your husband's more likely to barter for a new plow than fuss with that. The real work falls to women who share their secrets in hushed tones, a quiet rebellion against both nature and the church. You feel a pang of solidarity with the healer, her hands scarred from years of grinding roots for women like you. Joke number 2. Trying medieval contraception. You're half apothecary, half gambler, and all nerves. The risks aren't just spiritual. A botched remedy could land you in bed for weeks or worse. You've heard tales of women shunned for using witches' herbs, their names whispered as warnings. The line between medicine and magic, like in that apothecary shop, is razor thin. You're careful hiding your herbs in a clay jar, labeled for cooking. The village watches, always ready to gossip, and you've learned to smile and deflect, just like you did in those crowded huts. The bigger picture hits you as you leave the hut, the pouch heavy in your hand. Contraception wasn't just about fewer mouths. It was about agency, a way to carve out breathing room in a world of endless labor. You think back to the nobles' strategic heirs, the peasants' overflowing hearth, the apothecary's love charms, each a piece of this delicate dance. Joke number 3. Medieval family planning. It's less a plan and more a prayer with a side of parsley. You slip into the dusk, the healer's warnings echoing, and wonder how many others are making these quiet choices, shaping their lives one bitter sip at a time. You slip out of the healer's hut, the bitter scent of rue still clinging to your fingers, and into the twilight shadows of a forest path, where whispers of forbidden love hum like a hidden pulse. The air is cool, laced with pine and the distant smoke of village fires. You're sneaking through the dangers of illicit affairs now, where passion defies the church's rules, the noble's contracts, and the village's watchful eyes. These stolen moments between lovers who shouldn't be carry a thrill, sharper than any aphrodisiac, but the risks are as heavy as the stones in a castle wall. You're about to navigate the heart-pounding world of secret trysts and the consequences that could unravel everything. Mainstream fact extramarital affairs in medieval Europe were heavily condemned, with the church and secular laws imposing harsh penalties like public penance fines or banishment to deter adultery. You're a merchant's wife may be drawn to a charming troubadour who sings too sweetly at the market. Your husband's busy with trade and the troubadour's glances linger. A single meeting behind a haystack or in a quiet barn could spark rumors that reach the priest or worse, your spouse. The church calls it mortal sin, and the law might strip you of property or honor. Yet the pull of desire makes you consider the risk, if only for a moment. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval lovers used coded messages like tying a specific colored ribbon to a tree to signal a rendezvous without speaking a word. Imagine you slipping a red thread onto a low branch, heart racing as you hope your lover sees it before a nosy villager does. Historians still argue whether these signals were widespread or the stuff of romantic tales exaggerated by poets to add drama. You're creeping along the forest's edge, The crunch of leaves underfoot louder than you'd like. The moon's your only light casting eerie shapes that make every rustle feel like a spy. You've chosen this spot carefully, far from the village, away from the church's prying eyes and the noble's patrols. Your lover waits a shadow against an oak and the air between you crackles with urgency. There's no time for poetry or potions. This is raw, rushed, and reckless. You know the stakes. If caught, you could face public humiliation. Standing in a white sheet at church while the congregation whispers. Worse, noble families might demand blood to restore honor. The church's iron grip, that suffocating force from the chapel, looms largest here. You're defying God's law, risking excommunication, a spiritual death sentence that cuts you off from salvation. Confession's no easy out. Priests demand details, and penance could mean months of fasting or pilgrimage. You push the thought aside, focusing on the warmth of your lover's hand, but guilt gnaws like a flea in your tunic. The village isn't much kinder. You've seen women shunned for less, their names spat in the mud, their families shamed. Men fare better, but not by much. A nobleman caught straying might lose favor. A peasant his livelihood. Joke number 1. Medieval affairs. It's like sneaking a snack, but the kitchen's on fire and the cook's got a crossbow. Secrecy's your only shield. You've learned to speak in glances, to pass notes, tucked into loaves of bread or hidden under market stalls. You avoid the well where gossip flows faster than water, and you never linger too long in one place. Some lovers use go-between servants or friends who carry messages for a coin or a favor. You've bribed a peddler to deliver a whisper word, but even he's a risk. Trust is fragile and betrayal's a single careless moment away. The forest feels alive with eyes, animal spirits, or worse, a neighbor hunting for scandal. Joke number 2. Planning a medieval tryst. You're half Romeo, half secret agent, and all paranoia. The thrill's part of it though. Every stolen touch feels like a victory against the rules that bind you. Church family duty. You're not just lovers. You're rebels, carving out a space where you're free if only for an hour. But freedom's costly. You hear tales of lovers flogged in the town square. Their shame a warning to others. Nobles face subtler punishments. Disinherited sons, divorced wives, sent to convents. You think of that noble marriage, its cold alliances, and wonder if those lords and ladies sought affairs to feel something real. The community's your biggest foe. Villages are tight-knit, and secrets don't keep. You've dodged the baker's wife who notices everything, and you're careful not to smile too long at your lover in public. Some affairs start innocently, a shared laugh at a feast, a dance that lingers, but they spiral fast. You remember the peasant's crowded hut, where privacy was a myth, and realize hiding an affair there's near impossible. Even nobles with their curtained beds can't escape servants' ears. You're always one step from discovery, and the fear sharpens every moment. Joke number 3. Medieval love notes. Less my heart's yours, and more meet me by the pigsty. Bring a hood. As you slip back toward the village, the forest swallowing your footsteps, you feel the weight of what you've risked. Illicit love's a fire bright, consuming, and dangerous. You think of the apothecary's charms, the healer's herbs, the church's warnings, all part of this world, where desire fights to breathe. You hide your ribbon, check your face for telltale flush, and wonder how many others are slipping through the shadows tonight, chasing a spark worth burning for. You emerge from the forest's secretive shadows. The thrill of forbidden love still tingling in your veins, and step into the flickering torchlight of a city's underbelly. The air is thick with the stench of ale smoke and something sour you'd rather not name. You're wandering the shadowy streets of medieval brothels now, where desire meets commerce. In a world both hidden and brazen, these houses of pleasure tucked behind taverns, or marked by a discreet red lantern, are where men and sometimes women seek what marriage fate or fear deny them. You're about to explore this clandestine trade, its rules, its risks, and the lives caught in its web. Mainstream fact prostitution was widespread in medieval Europe, often regulated by cities to control disease and crime, with brothels operating legally in designated areas like London's Southwark or Paris's Rue de Glatigny. You're a traveler, maybe a merchant with a few coins to spare, drawn to a narrow alley where women lean from windows, their laughter sharp against the night. The church condemns their trade as sinful, but secular authorities tolerated taxing brothels to fill city coffers. It's a strange compromise, damned by the pulpit, yet licensed by the mayor. You pay your coin and the door creaks open, revealing a world of candlelit rooms and guarded smiles. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval brothels used mermaid nicknames for their workers, a nod to mythical sirens, luring sailors to their doom. Cheeky branding for a port town's clientele. Picture you asking for Mermaid Agnes at a coastal brothel, half expecting a fishtail and getting a wry grin instead. Historians still argue whether these nicknames were common or just colorful anecdotes in court records. You're inside now, the air heavy with cheap perfume and the tang of spilled wine. The room's cramped, its walls draped with faded cloth to hide the damp. A straw mattress sits in the corner, not unlike the peasant's bed from that village hut. But here, it's a workplace, not a home. The woman before you is young, maybe 20, her dress cut low but patched at the hems. She's professional, her banter practiced, but her eyes scan you for trouble. You're not her first customer tonight, and you won't be her last. The transaction's quick coin for time. No illusions of romance. Joke. Number 1. Medieval brothels. Like a tavern, but the drinks are pricier, and the barmaid's on a timer. The women here aren't free agents. Many are bound by debt or desperation, sold into the trade by families or lured by false promises. You hear whispers of their stories. Orphans, widows, or runaways with nowhere else to go. The brothel keeper, a sharp-eyed matron, takes a cut of every coin, and the city's fines eat up the rest. Some workers gain a kind of independence, saving enough to buy their way out, but it's rare. You feel a pang remembering the noble's arranged marriage, the peasant's hard-won love, different worlds, but all shaped by survival's harsh math. The church's shadow, that relentless force from the chapel, looms even here. Prostitution's a sin, and priests rail against it, urging repentance. Yet some clergy are customers slipping in after dark, their hypocrisy a poorly kept secret. You've heard of stew houses, bathhouses doubling as brothels where monks might claim they're just there for a scrub. The church pushes for reform. But the brothels thrive as safety valve for a society bound by rigid rules. You wonder if the same priests who condemned that forest affair turn a blind eye here, where sin's contained and taxable. Joke number 2. Medieval brothel etiquette. Tip well and don't ask if the mermaid's real. The risks are plenty. Disease is a specter, syphilis won't arrive for centuries, but other ailments spread fast in close quarters. You've heard of burning sickness treated with mercury. That's as likely to kill as cure. Violence is another threat. Customers can turn rough, and the law rarely protects these women. You notice the matron's burly son lurking by the door, a reminder that trouble's met with fists. The women themselves are savvy, dodging drunks and sizing up strangers like you. They've learned to survive in a world that both needs and scorns them. The community's complicity is unspoken but clear. Townsfolk know where the brothels are, and wives grumble about husbands who stray. Yet the trade persists, a shadow economy that props up the respectable world. You think of the apothecary's love potions meant to spark desire within bounds, and the healer's herbs guarding against too many mouths. Brothels are the flip side, a place where desire escapes those bounds for a price. Some women gain status here, courted by wealthy patrons, but most are trapped their lives a cycle of labor and risk. Joke number 3. Medieval brothel ads. Visit Mermaid Lane, our straws fresher than the taverns. As you leave the door, thudding shut behind you. The street feels colder, the torchlight dimmer. You carry the weight of what you've seen, not just the act, but the lives behind it. The choices made in a world of few options. You think back to the noble's bed, the peasant's fire, the forest's reckless passion, each a piece of this tapestry, where love and need collide. You slip into the night, the city's pulse fading, and wonder how many others seek solace in these shadows, chasing warmth in a world that offers so little. You step away from the smoky alleys of the brothel district, the flicker of red lanterns fading behind you, and into the rigid structure of a medieval household where the air hums with the clatter of looms and the scent of fresh-baked bread. You're in a world governed by strict gender roles where men and women navigate a web of expectations that shape every glance, touch, and whispered word in the bedroom. From peasant huts to noble castles, these norms dictate who holds power, who submits, and how intimacy unfolds. You're about to see how these invisible rules, etched by tradition and faith, molded private lives, leaving little room for deviation, but plenty for quiet rebellion. Mainstream fact: medieval society was patriarchal, with men holding authority over households, and women expected to focus on domestic duties and child-rearing as outlined in both secular law and church teachings. You're a woman, perhaps a weaver's wife. Your days filled with the spinning wool, tending the fire, and minding the children. Your husband's the head of the house, his word final even in matters of affection. The church reinforces this preaching that women are subordinate, their role to obey and nurture. In the bedroom, your desires take a back seat. Intimacy is his right. Your duty and the goal is heirs, not pleasure. Yet you find ways to assert yourself, a subtle nudge in how you linger over a touch or steer a late-night conversation. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval women wore chastity belts, metal contraptions locked around the waist, supposedly to ensure fidelity while their husbands were away. Though many historians now think these were more myth than reality, or at least exaggerated in later tales. Imagine you eyeing a clanking belt in a noble's armory, wondering if it's a cruel joke or a bizarre fashion statement. Historians still argue whether these devices were widely used or just a cautionary tale to keep women in line. You're in a modest home, the same cramped hut from the peasant village, its straw floor crunching underfoot. The fire's low, casting a warm glow on your husband as he mends a tool. You're expected to be the heart of this space, cooking, cleaning, birthing babies, while he works the fields or trades in town. The church's voice echoes from that chapel visit, urging modesty and submission. You're taught to see your body as a vessel for God's will, not a source of joy. But in the quiet of night, when the children sleep and the curtains drawn, you negotiate a different reality. You tease him about his snoring and he laughs, pulling you close. These moments, small as they are, chip away at the rigid roles you're handed. For men, the rules are different but no less binding. You switch perspectives, stepping into your husband's boots. You're expected to be strong, decisive, the provider who keeps the family afloat. Intimacy is your privilege, but it comes with pressure. Produce sons, prove your virility, uphold the family name. The church and community watch you too, ready to mock a man who's henpecked or fails to control his wife. You feel the weight of it even in the bedroom, where every act is a performance of power. Joke number 1. Medieval manhood. It's like running a kingdom, but your castle's a hut, and your army's a cranky goat. Nobles face their own version like those in that strategic marriage. You're a lord, your wife, a partner in alliance, but still beneath you in rank. She's expected to be graceful, fertile, and silent on matters of state. Yet you've seen her outwit advisors, her sharp mind a match for yours. In private, you let her lead a little. Maybe she chooses the hour, the mood, but never in public. The balance is delicate and you both know it. Gender roles aren't just personal. They're political, a dance of power played out in every whispered agreement or knowing glance. The church's rules, those unyielding edicts, tighten the screws. Women are Eve's daughters, temptresses by nature, while men must guard against lust. You're caught in a paradox, intimacy sacred, but desire's dangerous. You think of the apothecary's love charms, the forest's illicit thrills, and realize how gender shapes even rebellion. Women risk more shame, exile, or worse, while men might dodge with a fine or a wing. You've heard of women brewing those contraceptive teas in secret, a quiet defiance of their duty to bear endless children. Men, meanwhile, slip to brothels, their sins more easily forgiven. Joke number 2. Medieval gender roles. She spins the wool, he swings the axe, and they both dodge the priest's lecture. The community enforces these norms like a second skin. You're watched at markets, feasts, even in your own home. A wife who speaks too boldly risks being called a shrew. A husband too soft a fool. Yet cracks appear. You've seen women barter as fiercely as men, or men cradle babies, with a tenderness that defies the strongman script. In the bedroom, these roles blur most here. You're just two people navigating need and trust in a world that demands you play parts. Joke number 3. Medieval romance under gender rules. It's like a play where she's the muse and he's the hero, but they both forget their lines. As you settle by the fire, the hut's warmth wrapping around you, you see how gender roles shaped intimacy into a battlefield of duty and desire. You think back to the noble's bed, the peasant's labor, the brothel's shadows, each colored by these unspoken laws. You pull the blanket closer, wondering how couples found space to be themselves, carving out love in a world that told them who they had to be. You ease out of the household's rigid roles, where gender carved strict lines around every touch, and step into the gilded chaos of a royal court, where whispers of scandal ripple like wine in a goblet. The air is rich with perfume wax and the faint metallic tang of ambition. You're surrounded by velvet-clad nobles, their eyes sharp as daggers, trading secrets in shadowed alcoves. Here, you hear the echoes of royal scandals, kings and queens, whose indiscretions shook thrones and stirred ballads. These tales of forbidden love and reckless passion reveal the fragile line between power and ruin, where a single misstep could topple a dynasty. You're about to dive into the high-stakes drama of royal bedrooms, where desire was as political as it was personal. Mainstream fact: royal affairs in medieval Europe often had far-reaching consequences, as monarchs' personal lives were inseparable from political alliances, with scandals like those of England's Edward II and Piers Gaveston fueling unrest. You're a courtier, perhaps, lingering near a banquet hall where King Philip's latest flirtation with a lady-in-waiting sparks murmurs. His queen regal but steely watches from her throne, her smile tight. An affair here isn't just a private matter, it risks treaties, wars, or a pope's disapproval. You tread carefully, knowing a whispered rumor could earn you favor or a one-way trip to the dungeon. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some royal lovers gifted each other posy rings inscribed with secret love poems worn openly, yet understood only by the pair like medieval bling with a coded wink. Imagine you slipping a ring onto your beloved's finger, its tiny verse a secret amid the court's prying eyes. Historians still argue whether these rings were common or rare tokens, reserved for the boldest royal romantics. You're in a grand chamber, its walls, draped with tapestries of unicorns, and battles the same taster bed. From that noble marriage, looming grander here, draped in gold-threaded silk, the king's latest paramour, a noblewoman, with a dangerous smile slips through a hidden door. You're not supposed to see this, but courtiers notice everything. The affair's an open secret whispered over spiced wine. Her husband's away, and the king's favor means land and titles for her family. But the queen's spies are everywhere, and the church, that ever-present shadow from the chapel, condemns such sins with extra zeal when crowns are involved. You feel the tension thick as the velvet curtains, knowing one wrong word could spark a scandal. Royal scandals differ from the forest trysts or brothel visits. Here, every move's a chess game. You recall that noble marriage, its alliances forged in bed kings and queens, face the same pressure but magnified. A king's mistress might birth a bastard, complicating succession, while a queen's lover could be branded a traitor. You've heard of queens like Eleanor of Aquitaine, whose rumored dalliances fueled gossip across continents. The stakes are dizzying. Divorce, exile, or execution lurk behind every stolen kiss. Joke number 1. Royal affairs. It's like flirting, but with a side of potential beheading. The court's a stage and everyone's watching. You mingle at a feast, the clink of goblets masking whispered bets on how long the king's latest fling will last. Servants like those in the noble's castle are the real danger their loyalties bought, and they hear everything. You've seen maids slip notes to rival lords, trading secrets for coin. The queen, meanwhile, plays her own game, hosting lavish masques to distract from her husband's wandering eye. You admire her poise, but her silence feels like a storm brewing. The church weighs in, of course, urging fidelity, but popes often bend for kings who fund crusades or build cathedrals. Joke number 2. Royal scandal cover-up. Throw a bigger party and hope the pope's too busy to notice. The risks aren't just personal. A king's affair could alienate allies, like when a spurned queen's brother threatens war. You've heard of bastards legitimized sparking rebellions, or queens banished to convents, their names erased. The court thrives on these dramas, each scandal a chance to shift power. You're careful what you say, but you can't help listening. Every whisper's a clue to who's rising or falling. The king's lover wears that posy ring, its inscription hidden, but her confidence draws every eye. The community nobles, clergy, even peasants feeds on these tales. Ballads spread faster than plague, sung in taverns about queens who love too boldly. You think of the peasants' gossip, the brothel's whispers. Royal scandals are just louder with crowns instead of pitchforks. Some kings, like Francis Louis II, face papal wrath for their loves, while others, like Henry II, juggled mistresses with diplomatic finesse. Queens had less room to maneuver. Their virtue was the kingdom's honor. You feel a pang for them trapped in a game where passion was a weapon turned against them. Joke number 3. Royal love letters. Burn them, or their evidence in your next trial. As you slip from the banquet hall, the music fading, you carry the weight of these glittering, dangerous liaisons. Royal scandals weren't just gossip. They reshaped borders, faiths, and futures. You think back to the apothecary's charms, the forest's reckless passion, The household's rigid roles, each a thread in this tapestry of desire and power. You pause by a window, the night air cool, and wonder how these royal hearts bore the cost of their scandals, their echoes ringing through history's halls. You drift from the opulent court, its scandals still buzzing in your ears, and step into the cold stone silence of a monastery where the air smells of damp parchment and melted wax. Flickering candles cast long shadows across rows of hooded figures, their chants a low hum that vibrates in your chest. You're here to probe the struggles of celibate monks and nuns, whose vows of chastity clashed with the very human desires they swore to renounce. In these cloistered walls, meant to be havens of purity temptation, lurked like a thief testing resolve and sparking whispered sins. You're about to uncover how these holy men and women wrestled with their hearts in a world that demanded they have none. Mainstream fact monastic celibacy was a cornerstone of medieval religious life, mandated by the church to ensure monks and nuns devoted themselves fully to God, free from worldly distractions like family or desire. You're a young monk, barely 20. Your head shaved, your rough wool robe, scratching your skin. You've taken vows, poverty, obedience, chastity, promising to forsake the pleasures of the flesh. The monastery's routine is relentless prayers at midnight, labor in the fields, silent meals. Intimacy, even friendship, is discouraged. Your love belongs to God alone. Yet, in the quiet of your cell, you feel stirring memories of a village girl, a fleeting thought that lingers too long. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries banned monks from keeping cats, fearing the act of petting them might awaken sensual urges. Picture you sneaking a pat to a stray tabby in the cloister, wondering if it's a sin or just a really soft cat. Historians still argue whether these rules reflected genuine fears or were just overzealous attempts to control every aspect of monastic life. You're kneeling in the chapel, the cold stone numbing your knees, as the abbot reads from scripture about resisting temptation. The church, that iron grip from our chapel days, is absolute here. Chastity is not just a rule but a battle against Satan himself. You're taught that desire is a demon creeping into idle moments. To fight it, you fast until your stomach gnaws, or copy manuscripts until your fingers cramp, hoping exhaustion drowns out wayward thoughts. But the monastery's closeness breeds its own dangers. You share dormitories, work side by side, and sometimes catch a brother's gaze that feels too warm. You look away, heart pounding, knowing a single slip could mean disgrace. Nuns face the same struggle their convents mirrors of this austere life. You imagine a young nun, her veil heavy, tending the convent garden. She's vowed to be Christ's bride, her heart sealed from earthly love. Yet she hums a tune from her village days, and the memory of a boy's laugh sneaks in. Convents were often stricter, with high walls and grilled windows, to keep the world and man at bay. But temptation wasn't always external. You've heard whispers of nuns forming particular friendships, bonds that skirted the edge of sin. Their letters burned to avoid scandal. Joke number 1. Monastic life. It's like signing up for eternal Lent with no dessert and extra guilt. The church's rules are merciless. If caught, you face penance, flogging, isolation, or public confession before your brothers. Worse, you could be expelled, cast into a world you've forsaken with no skills but prayer. You've heard tales of monks sneaking to taverns or nuns, meeting peddlers at the gate, their vows unraveling in a moment of weakness. The abbot watches, but so do your brothers, their loyalty, torn between friendship and duty. You're careful, keeping your thoughts locked tight, but the silence of the cloister amplifies every doubt. The forest's illicit lovers had wrists, But here, the stakes feel eternal. Joke number 2. Resisting temptation in a monastery. It's like ignoring a pie. Cooling on the windowsill, but the pie's a metaphor and the windowsill's God. The community's both your strength and your snare. You lean on your brothers for support, praying together at dawn. But their presence is a constant test. You've seen a monk blush when brushing hands in the scriptorium, or a nun linger too long over a shared hymn. These aren't grand passions, but small human moments that the church calls dangerous. You think of the brothel's open transactions, the royal court's gilded affairs. Monastic life is their opposite, a denial of desire so complete. It makes every feeling sharper. The world outside tempts too. Pilgrims bring news of feasts, marriages, life. You hear of a nun who fled with a minstrel her convent in uproar. Such stories are rare but potent, fueling both fear and forbidden dreams. You cling to routine prayer work, sleep hoping it anchors you. Some monks turn to flagellation, whipping their backs to drive out lust. But you stick to cold water and long walks. The cat purring by the kitchen is temptation enough. You laugh, but quietly, knowing humor's a risk too. Joke number 3. Monastic chastity. It's like guarding a castle where the enemy's already inside, and it's you. As you rise from prayer, the chapel's chill seeping into your bones, you feel the weight of this endless vigil. Monastic life was a crucible, forging souls through denial. But human hearts don't bend so easily. You think back to the apothecary's charms, the peasant's fire, the court's scandals, each a battle with desire fought in different arenas. You slip into your cell, the straw pallet creaking, and wonder how many others in these silent walls are wrestling their own quiet wars, seeking peace in a heart that still beats. You leave the monastery's cold stone and silent struggles behind, stepping into the cluttered chamber of a medieval physician, where the air smells of bitter herbs, old blood, and dusty scrolls. Shelves sag under the weight of clay jars and leather-bound books, their pages filled with cryptic diagrams of the body's mysteries. You're here to study medieval doctors' quirky health theories about intimacy, a world where love and lust were dissected through the lens of humors, stars, and divine will. These ideas, as strange as they seem, shaped how people understood their desires, blending science, superstition, and a touch of absurdity. You're about to unravel the peculiar ways physicians explained and prescribed for the heart's urges. Mainstream fact medieval medicine was rooted in the theory of the four humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, believed to govern health and temperament with intimacy, seen as a way to balance these fluids. You're a patient, maybe a merchant complaining of lovesickness, sitting on a wooden bench, while the physician strokes his beard. He diagnoses an excess of blood, making you sanguine and prone to passion. His prescription, a diet of cooling foods like lettuce, or maybe a strategic romp to purge the heat within marriage, of course. These ideas, drawn from ancient Greek texts like Hippocrates and Galen, were the backbone of medical thought, guiding how intimacy was both understood and managed. Here's a quirky tidbit: some physicians believed wearing a sapphire amulet could dampen desire by cooling the body's vital spirits, a kind of mystical energy tied to passion. Picture you clutching a blue stone to your chest, hoping it'll calm your racing heart before a village dance. Historians still argue whether these gemstone remedies were widely trusted or just a fancy placebo peddled to the wealthy. You're watching the physician mix a tonic vinegar rosewater and a pinch of something he calls dragon's herb. He claims it'll temper your ardor, aligning your humors with celestial harmony. The stars, he says, influence love. A misaligned Venus could make you reckless. You nod, half convinced, as he checks your pulse and mutters about Saturn's gloom. Medieval doctors saw intimacy as a health issue too much, and you risk depleting your vital spirits. Too little and your humors stagnate, leading to melancholy. It's a delicate balance, and you're supposed to trust this man with his ink-stained fingers and questionable tonics to keep you steady. The church, that familiar shadow from the chapel, complicates things. Intimacy is fine for procreation, but pleasure for its own sake. That's a humoral imbalance and a sin. Physicians often walk the tightrope, prescribing for health while dodging accusations of encouraging lust. You've heard of doctors advising noble couples like those in that strategic marriage to time their encounters for optimal health, preferably when the moon's waxing to boost fertility. You smirk, wondering if they consulted the stars before drawing the bed curtains. Joke number 1. Medieval doctors love advice. It's like a horoscope, but with more leeches and fewer memes. Women's bodies were a particular obsession. You overhear the physician lecture. A young wife about wandering wombs, a theory, claiming the uterus could roam the body causing hysteria or excessive desire. The cure, pregnancy to anchor it or pungent herbs to draw it back. You roll your eyes, modern medicine's got nothing on this nonsense, but she listens, clutching her sapphire amulet. Men weren't spared either. Impotence was blamed on cold humors or witchcraft, treated with spicy foods or prayers. You'd think of the apothecary's love potions, not so different from these scientific brews, and wonder where medicine ends and magic begins. The setting's grimly practical. The physician's table holds a urine flask. Its contents swirled to diagnose your conditions. Cloudy means too much passion, he says. A scalpel glints nearby, a reminder that treatments could turn invasive. You're wary of bloodletting, a common fix for overheated humors, but he insists it'll cool your desires. The room's stuffy, its single window shuttered, and the smell of old remedies makes you queasy. You'd rather be back in the village, flirting by the well, but health and love are tangled here. Each touch a medical event. Joke number 2. Medieval sex therapy. Eat a cucumber, avoid Mars, and hope your womb stays put. The community's in on it too. Physicians were respected, but their quirky theories sparked gossip. You've heard villagers mock the idea that onions boost virility, yet they still buy them from the market. Nobles like those in the royal court consulted university-trained doctors, while peasants relied on local healers, blending humoral theory with folklore. You remember the contraceptive herbs from the healer's hut, same logic, different stakes. Everyone's trying to control the body's urges, whether for health, sin, or survival. The risks are real. A bad tonic could poison you, and a physician's advice might land you in the church's bad books. You've heard of a lord dosed with too much mandrake, meant to spark passion, who slept for days instead. The line between cure and calamity is thin, and you're cautious, sipping only half the tonic. The physician's confidence is reassuring, but his tools look like they belong in a blacksmith shop. You think of the monastery's celibate struggles, the brothel's risky transactions. Different worlds, same human puzzle. Joke number 3. Medieval doctor's visit. You leave with a potion, a prayer, and a bill you can't afford. As you step from the chamber, the physician's voice fading, you feel the weight of these strange ideas. Intimacy wasn't just love or sin. It was a medical mystery charted by stars and humors. You clutch the sapphire, its coolness a faint comfort, and think back to the noble's bed, the monk's silent wars, the forest's stolen kisses. You wonder how these theories shaped whispered moments, and how hearts navigated a world where even love needed a prescription. You slip out of the physician's cluttered chamber, the tang of vinegar and herbs fading, and step into the raucous chaos of a medieval festival where the air hums with roasted meat, spilled ale, and the twang of lutes. Torches blaze, casting a golden glow over villagers dancing in a whirl of laughter and mud-stained boots. You're here to join the feasts that fueled romantic sparks where the rules of church and court loosen and flirtations bloom amid the revelry. From May Day polls to harvest celebrations, these gatherings were a rare chance for hearts to collide, turning strangers into lovers under the guise of communal joy. You're about to dive into the sweaty, joyful pulse of these moments where desire found a stage. Mainstream fact medieval festivals, like those tied to seasonal or religious events, were key social occasions, often sanctioned by the church where communities gathered to eat, drink, and dance, fostering opportunities for courtship. You're a young villager weaving through the crowd at a midsummer feast, your cheeks flushed from ale and the heat of a bonfire. The church may frown on excess, but these events are its compromise moments of controlled chaos, where you can flirt without a priest breathing down your neck. You spot a girl across the fire, her braid swinging as she dances, and feel a pull stronger than any apothecary's potion. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some festivals featured kissing games like passing an apple with your mouth, a playful excuse for closeness that skirted the church's rules on modesty. Picture you fumbling with an apple, hoping not to drop it, while locking eyes with your crush. Medieval spin the bottle, but with worse dental hygiene. Historians still argue whether these games were innocent fun or a sly way to bend the rules of propriety. You're in the thick of it now, the village green alive with color ribbons tied to poles, peddlers hawking pies, children darting underfoot. The air's thick with the scent of smoked fish and fresh bread, and your boots stick in the mud churned by dancers. You join a circle, dance hands brushing hers, as you spin her laugh, louder than the fiddler's tune. These festivals are a pressure valve, loosening the gender roles from that household, the church's iron grip, even the monastery's vows. For one night, you're not just a plowman or a weaver's son. You're free to chase a spark as long as you don't cross the line into scandal. The church, that ever-watchful shadow, hovers even here. Priests bless the feast, but they're quick to preach against lewd behavior. You're careful not to linger too long with her in the crowd. Gossip spreads faster than wildfire, and you've seen the fallout of those forest affairs. Still, festivals are a loophole. You can offer her a ribbon or share a mug of ale without committing a sin. The community's in on it, matchmaking aunts nudging you toward eligible girls, their eyes gleaming with plans for next year's weddings. You think of the peasants hand-fasting a simpler vow under a tree and wonder if tonight's dance could lead there. Let's talk atmosphere. The bonfire crackles sparks, drifting like tiny stars, and the music's relentless drums, pipes, and voices raised in bawdy songs. You're swept into a game, passing that apple mouth to mouth, your heart racing as her breath grazes yours. It's innocent mostly, but the thrill's real. Some festivals like Carnival push the boundaries further with masks, hiding faces, and inhibitions. You've heard of nobles joining in, disguised as commoners, flirting with abandon. The court scandals pale here. Nobody's plotting a coup, just a kiss. Joke number 1, medieval flirting at a feast. It's speed dating with a side of mutton and zero privacy. The risks aren't gone though. A bold move like sneaking her behind a tent could spark rumors or a priest's ire. You've seen couples caught in the act, dragged to church for penance, their festival joy soured. The community's both ally and judge. Villagers cheer young love, but scorn those who go too far. You keep it light, offering her a flower crown, your fingers brushing as she accepts. It's a small gesture, But in this world of rigid rules, it feels like rebellion. You think of the brothel's transactions, the court's dangerous liaisons here, flirtations a safer thrill, but no less electric. Joke number 2, festival romance. You're one apple pass away from a sermon or a betrothal. The night wears on the fire dying to embers, and you feel the pull of possibility. Festivals were where matches were made, where a glance could turn into a vow. You see older couples married years ago at a feast like this, swaying to the music, their hands worn but entwined. The church may set the rules, but these moments belong to the heart. You spin her one last time, the world a blur of firelight and laughter, and wonder if this spark could outlast the night. Joke number 3, medieval dance moves. Step, twirl, dodge, the priest repeat. As you catch your breath, the music fading, you feel the festival's magic linger. These nights were a rare gift, a space where desire could breathe even under watchful eyes. You think back to the physician's tonics, the monk's silent battles, the noble's cold bed, each a piece of this world where love fought to bloom. You tug the flower crown into your belt, her smile etched in your mind, and wonder how many hearts were kindled here, their sparks lighting up the medieval night. You wander from the festival's fading embers, the echo of laughter and lute, still ringing, and step into a tailor shop, its air thick with the scent of wool linen and dyed thread. Bolts of fabric line the walls, from coarse, homespun to shimmering silk, each a silent player in the game of seduction. You're here to unravel the allure of medieval fashion, where clothing wasn't just protection, but a language of desire, signaling status, intent, and hidden passions. Every lace, every fold carried meaning, turning the act of dressing into a delicate dance of attraction. You're about to slip into the layers that shaped intimacy, where a glimpse of ankle or a well-tied belt could spark a scandal or a sigh. Mainstream fact, medieval clothing was highly symbolic, with sumptuary laws regulating who could wear what based on social class, ensuring nobles dazzled in silks while peasants stuck to rough wool. You're a young woman, perhaps a merchant's daughter, standing before a mirror as the tailor adjusts your kirtle, its tight lacing accentuating your form. The dress is modest as the church demands, but its cut-low neckline for nobles, fitted waist for all hints at allure. Men's fashion is no less deliberate. A knight's padded doublet shows off his shoulders, a silent boast of strength. These clothes aren't just worn, they're performed, each stitch a signal in the game of courtship. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some women wore freckled stockings, brightly dyed with patterns, to draw eyes to their legs. When skirts lifted during a dance, a subtle rebellion against modesty rules. Picture you slipping on a pair of red-striped hose, knowing they'll catch a suitor's eye at the next feast. Historians still argue whether these flashy accessories were common or a bold choice of the fashion-forward few. You're surrounded by the tailor's tools, shears, bone needles, and a chalk-marked table where your gown takes shape. The fabric's heavy layered for warmth in those drafty huts and castles we visited. You adjust a coif, a snug cap, framing your face, its edges embroidered to hint at wealth. Men wear hose, so tight they're practically painted on a style. That's both practical for riding and, let's be honest, a flex. The church, ever the killjoy from that chapel, preaches against vanity. But you've seen priests in fine robes too. Clothing's a battlefield, status versus sin, desire versus decorum. You smooth your skirt, feeling its weight, and know every eye will judge you tonight. The act of dressing is intimate in itself. You need help with the laces, a friend or servant tugging them tight, their fingers brushing your back. It's a moment of trust, like those shared in the peasant's hut or the noble's chamber. Undressing is even more charged. Loosening a corset or untying a codpiece takes time, turning the process into a ritual. You've heard of lovers lingering over these moments, each undone knot, a step closer to vulnerability. Joke number 1. Medieval foreplay. It's 20 minutes of unlacing and hoping you don't rip the only dress you own. Color matters. You choose green, a nod to fertility and spring, or red, bold and passionate if you're daring. Nobles flaunt purple reserved for royalty, while peasants stick to browns and grays. Sumptuary laws ensure you know your place. Accessories amplify the message. A jeweled brooch screams wealth. A simple ribbon tied at the waist whispers flirtation. You recall the court's posy rings their secret poems. Here, a belt might be a lover's gift, its buckle etched with a heart. Every detail's a signal read by a society trained to spot intent in a hemline or a sleeve. The community watches as always. You stride through the market, your new gown turning heads, but a too bright color or a too tight fit invites gossip. You've seen women shamed for dressing above their station, or men mocked for overly ornate tunics. The festival's dance floor with its apple-passing games is where fashion shines. Your skirt swirls, revealing those freckled stockings, and you catch his grin. The church may scold, but the crowd loves a spectacle. You think of the brothel's patched dresses, the monks' plain robes. Clothing tells their stories too. Each thread a choice. Joke number 2. Medieval fashion. It's like Instagram, but your filter's a dye vat, and your likes are judgmental priests. The risks are real, sumptuary finds could bankrupt you, and a bold outfit might land you in a sermon. You've heard of a lady fined for wearing a noble's velvet, her flirtation with status costlier than any affair. Yet, clothing's power is undeniable. A well-placed ribbon could spark a dance, a marriage, or a scandal. You adjust your coif, feeling its weight, like the expectations it carries, and step into the crowd, ready to play the game. Joke number 3. Medieval wardrobe malfunction. One loose lace, and you're the village's next morality tale. As you leave the tailor's, the fabric soft against your skin, you feel the pull of this sartorial dance. Clothing wasn't just cover, it was a language of desire, speaking what words couldn't. You think back to the festival's firelit flirtations, the court's whispered scandals, the physician's odd prescriptions, each shaped by how bodies were adorned. You smooth your gown, ready for the next glance, and wonder how many hearts were won or lost with a single daring stitch. You step out of the tailor's shop, the weight of your new gown still settling on your shoulders, and into the quiet hush of a medieval evening, where the air carries the faint scent of wood smoke and cooling earth. The village is settling down, torches dimming as families retreat to their homes. You're here to settle into nightly rituals that fostered closeness, those small, tender acts that wove intimacy into the fabric of daily life. In the flicker of a single candle, couples found moments of connection, from shared prayers to whispered stories in a world where the night was both a refuge and a challenge. You're about to explore how these routines, simple yet profound, nurtured bonds in the cramped, drafty spaces we've come to know. Mainstream, fact, medieval bedtime routines were shaped by practical needs and religious customs, with couples often praying together or sharing stories to strengthen their bond, as documented in household manuals and letters from the period. You're in a peasant's hut like the one from that muddy village, the fire reduced to glowing embers. You and your spouse kneel on the straw-covered floor, murmuring a prayer to ward off night's dangers, thieves, spirits, or illness. The church, that ever-present force from the chapel, encourages this, seeing bedtime as a time to prepare for death, not romance. But once the prayers are done, you linger, sharing a quiet laugh or a story from the day, the warmth of the moment outweighing the cold. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some couples slept with a dream pillow stuffed with herbs like lavender or mugwort, believed to bring sweet dreams or even prophetic visions of love. Picture you tucking a lumpy sack under your head, hoping for a dream of your beloved's smile, but sneezing from the dusty herbs instead. Historians still argue whether these pillows were common or a niche custom. Among those dabbling in folklore, you're sitting on the edge of a straw pallet, the same lumpy bed from that first night. It's creak familiar now. The room's dark save for a tallow candle, its smoky scent mingling with the straw's earthiness. You help your spouse unlace their tunic fingers, brushing calloused skin, a ritual as intimate as any festival dance. These acts, untying knots, combing hair, or rubbing sore feet, aren't just chores. They're a language of care learned in the absence of privacy. You think of the tailor's laces, how they signal desire. Here, they're undone with trust, each gesture a silent vow. The night's rhythm is deliberate. You douse the fire, check the door's latch, maybe sprinkle salt at the threshold to keep spirits at bay. The church approves of these habits, tying them to salvation, but you've made them your own. You tell a story, a folk tale about a knight and a dragon, or a bawdy tale from the festival, your voice low, to avoid waking the kids. Your spouse chuckles, adding their own twist, and the hut feels smaller, warmer. These moments tucked between survival and sleep are where love lives, far from the court scandals or the monks' silent battles. Joke number 1. Medieval bedtime. It's less pillow talk. More did you lock the goat out. The lack of privacy that constant from the peasant's life shapes these rituals. You're never truly alone. Children snore nearby, or a servant's pallet creaks across the room. You've learned to whisper, to touch lightly, making intimacy a quiet art. The church's rules linger, prayer before pleasure always, but you bend them, stealing a kiss as the candle sputters. It's not defiance like the forest affair, but a softer rebellion carved in the margins of a hard day. The wealthier have their own version. You picture a noble couple like those in that arranged marriage in a curtained taster bed. They share wine, maybe read from a psalter, their voices blending in the candlelight. Their rituals are grander. Servants warm the sheets. A silver basin holds rose water for washing, but the heart's the same. They too find closeness in routine. A hand lingered on a shoulder, a shared glance over a book. You think of the physician's sapphire amulet, meant to cool passion. Here, it's the warmth of habit that kindles it. The community's presence, even at night, is inescapable. You've heard neighbors gossip about couples too loud or too quiet. Their bedtime habits a village fascination. Some rituals like singing lullabies or telling tales are shared beyond the family village. Elders pass down stories that bind you all. You recall the festival's flirtations, how a dance could spark a betrothal. These nightly moments solidify it, turning sparks into steady flames. Joke number 2. Medieval pillow talk. Half love, half debating who's milking the cow tomorrow. The risks are subtle but real. A missed prayer might invite bad luck, or a too loud laugh could wake the household, sparking teasing by dawn. You've heard of couples scolded for skipping vespers, their devotion questioned. Yet these rituals are a haven, a space where you're not just a worker or a wife, but a partner. You pull the blanket close its weight like the day's labor and feel your spouse's breath steady beside you. It's not the grand passion of a royal scandal, but it's yours, built in these quiet hours. Joke number 3. Medieval bedtime stories. They start with once upon a time and end with hope. The bedbugs don't bite. As you blow out the candle, the darkness soft and heavy, you feel the power of these small acts. They're the glue of medieval love, binding hearts in a world of rules and risks. You think back to the festival's fire, the tailor's seductive threats, the physician's strange cures, each a piece of this intricate dance. You settle into the straw, the night's hush, wrapping around you, and wonder how many others are weaving closeness tonight, one whispered story at a time. You drift from the quiet intimacy of the peasant's hut, the candle's last flicker still warm in your mind, and step into a broader tapestry, where the echoes of medieval love stories linger like mist over a morning field. The air carries the faint scent of old parchment as if you're leafing through a troubadour's songbook, its pages worn by centuries of longing. You're here to reflect on the myths of love that shaped the medieval heart tales of knights, ladies, and star-crossed lovers that still whisper to us today. These stories, born in courts and villages, wove ideals of romance that endure coloring how we see love across time. You're about to trace their threads from poetic fantasies to the gritty truths we've uncovered. Mainstream fact medieval literature, like the romances of King Arthur or the tales of Tristan and Isolde, created idealized visions of love that influence both noble and common perceptions, blending courtly love with heroic deeds. You're a listener in a great hall like the one where knights swore poetic devotion, captivated by a minstrel's tale of Lancelot and Guinevere. Their forbidden love, all passion and sacrifice, sets your heart racing, but you know it's a polished mirror reflecting dreams, not the muddy reality of the village or the calculated marriages of nobles. These stories shaped expectations, making love a quest, even if real life was messier. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval love tales included magical elements like potions that forced undying love, not unlike the apothecary's brews we explored, but with dragons or cursed rings for extra flair. Picture you wide-eyed hearing about a knight drinking a love draught and chasing a lady across enchanted forests, wondering if your own herbal tea could ever compete. Historians still argue whether these tales were pure entertainment or subtly taught moral lessons about desire's dangers. You're seated by a fire not unlike the peasant's hearth, but now it's a storyteller's circle. The room alive with rapt faces. The minstrel's voice weaves a tale of a lady locked in a tower, her knight braving monsters to win her. It's all very grand, but you think back to the forest's illicit trees, the brothel's harsh transactions. Real love was rarely so heroic. These myths, though, gave people something to aim for. You imagine a peasant girl, like the one at the festival, dreaming of a knight's devotion, while her betrothed mends nets. The stories offered escape, a way to reframe the grind of daily life into something epic. The church, that stern voice from the chapel, had a love-hate relationship with these tales. They praised chaste devotion like the monks' spiritual vows, but frowned on the lustful bits. You've heard priests rewrite romances turning passionate lovers into pious penitents, their kisses traded for prayers. Yet the stories persisted, sung in taverns, and scribbled in margins, because they spoke to something human. You recall the courtly love rules, their poetic restraint. Myths took those ideals and ran wild, giving passion a stage the church couldn't control. Joke number 1. Medieval love stories. Half the plot's a kiss, the other half's avoiding eternal damnation. The myths weren't just for nobles. You picture villagers gathered at that midsummer feast, retelling tales of star-crossed lovers to explain their own fleeting glances. These stories bridged classes, peasants and lords alike, sighed over Guinevere's betrayal or Isolde's tragic end. They shaped courtship, inspiring gestures like the posy rings from the royal court, or the ribbons tied at festivals. Even the physicians' humoral theories with their starry prescriptions echo these tales, tying love to fate. You feel the pull of it the way a good story makes your own heart ache even in a hut with a lumpy straw bed. The community fed these myths, passing them down like heirlooms. You've seen old women spin tales at the well, their voices blending fact and fancy. Or minstrels earned their supper with a song about a doomed lover. The stories weren't always kind. Women were often temptresses, men, noble saviors, reinforcing those gender roles we wrestled with. Yet they gave hope a sense that love could transcend the church's rules or the noble's contracts. You think of the contraceptive herbs hidden in secret. Myths let women dream of agency, even if reality was harsher. Joke number 2, medieval romance novels. Less paperback, more parchment and way more dragons. The risks were subtle but real. A story too bold could spark accusations of heresy or inspire reckless acts, like a knight copying Lancelot's devotion with the wrong lady. You've heard of minstrels fined for immoral tales, their songs too close to the forest's forbidden thrills. Yet the myths endured, shaping how couples saw themselves. You imagine a noble like those in the arranged marriage, whispering a line from a romance to his wife, hoping to kindle something real. Joke number 3, medieval love myths. They're why you think knight in shining armor, instead of guy with a pitchfork. As you lean back, the fire's glow softening, you feel the weight of these stories. They were more than entertainment. They were a lens, coloring the peasants' firelit nights, the court's scandals, the tailor's seductive laces. They promised love could be epic even in a world of mud and rules. You close your eyes, the minstrel's voice fading, and wonder how these tales shaped hearts, their echoes, lingering in our own dreams of love. You linger in the glow of those medieval love myths, their tales of knights and enchanted rings, still dancing in your mind, and step into the bustling pulse of a medieval town where the air hums with the clatter of carts and the tang of fresh bread. Cobblestone streets wind past market stalls, their awnings bright against the morning mist. You're here to stroll through the matchmaking scenes of urban life, where merchants, artisans, and apprentices weave webs of flirtation and ambition. Unlike the village's muddy fields or the court's gilded halls, towns pulse with opportunity, where a glance at the market or a deal struck over ale could spark a betrothal. You're about to dive into the lively chaos, where romance was brokered amid trade and gossip. Mainstream fact medieval towns were hubs of social mobility, where guilds and markets created spaces for young men and women to meet, often leading to marriages that blended love with economic strategy as seen in urban records like those of 14th century Florence. You're an apprentice tailor, threading your way through a crowded square, your eyes catching a baker's daughter as she hands out loaves. Towns offer more freedom than villages here. You're not under the priest's nose or your parents' roof. You can flirt openly, maybe offer her a ribbon from your shop, knowing a good match could mean a shop of your own someday. Marriage here isn't just love. It's a business deal with a heartbeat. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some towns held marriage markets where parents paraded eligible daughters before suitors complete with dowry lists like medieval resumes. Picture you dodging eager mothers waving parchment with their daughters' assets, land, livestock, or a knack for brewing. Historians still argue whether these markets were formal events or just exaggerated tales of matchmaking hustle. You're in the heart of the market now, stalls piled with apples, cloth, and ironware, the air thick with shouts and the sizzle of roasting chestnuts. You spot her again, her apron dusted with flour, her laugh cutting through the din. Townsfolk are less rigid than villagers. Gender roles like those in the household bend here. Women run stalls, haggle fiercely, and sometimes choose their own husbands, especially if they're widows with a trade. You're bolder than a peasant lad offering a jest about her bread's crust, hoping she'll bite. The festival's apple-passing games feel distant. This is flirtation with a purpose. Each smile a step toward a shared future. The church, that familiar shadow from the chapel, still watches, but its grip loosens in the town's bustle. Priests can't monitor every market glance, and betrothals here often skip the handfasting of the village for contracts drawn by notaries. You've seen couples seal their vows with a ring like the nobles' posy rings, but here it's practical, a promise of partnership in a shop or guild. Gossip's still a risk. The baker's daughter has suitors, and a rival apprentice might spread tales to ruin you. You tread lightly, keeping your flirtations public but not too bold, lest you end up in a sermon like those forest lovers. Let's talk setting. The town square's alive with jugglers tossing pins and dogs yapping at carts. You weave past a spice merchant, his saffron a nod to the apothecary's love potions, and dodge a cart of barrels. The taverns nearby where deals and romances are sealed over ale. You've heard of couples meeting there, sharing a bench and a plan, their parents haggling dowries in the corner. It's not the court's grandeur or the village's mud, but a middle ground where ambition fuels attraction. You offer her a sample of your finest thread, a small gesture, and her smile feels like a victory. Joke number 1. Urban courtship. It's like haggling for love, but the price is your future and a good apron. The risks are real. Choose wrong and you're tied to a failing trade or a family feud. You've heard of apprentices jilted for richer suitors, their hearts bruised as much as their wallets. The community's your stage and your judge. Guildmasters watch neighbors whisper, and a bad match could sink your reputation. You think of the brothel's transactions. The festival's fleeting Sparkstown romance is slower calculated but no less thrilling. A good marriage could lift you from apprentice to master your shop, a legacy. The town's energy shapes love's rhythm. You meet her at dusk when the market quiets, sharing a pie by the fountain. It's not the forest's secrecy or the noble's curtained bed, but it's yours, a moment carved from the chaos. You recall the physician's humoral theories, how love was a balance of blood and stars. Here, it's balanced with coin and cunning. Some couples court for years, saving for a home, while others seal the deal in weeks, driven by a good deal or a spark. You're cautious, knowing her father's watching his ledger as sharp as his gaze. Joke number 2. Town matchmaking. It's speed dating with a dowry and a side of market gossip. As the square empties, you feel the town's pulse, slowing its energy, settling into the night. Urban romance was a dance of opportunity, where love and ambition twined like threads in your tailor shop. You think back to the festival's firelit dances, the court's dangerous scandals, the hut's quiet rituals, each a facet of this world where hearts sought connection. You pocket the ribbon, her smile lingering, and wonder how many matches were made here, their futures built on a glance and a gamble. Joke number 3. Medieval town love. You woo her with thread, but her dad's got a contract ready. As you leave the square, the stars bright overhead, you carry the hum of this lively world. Towns were where dreams met deals, where love could shift a life's course. You glance back, her silhouette fading, and feel the pull of possibility, woven from the same hopes that fueled those mythic tales. You wander from the lively hum of the town square, the baker's daughter's smile still tugging at your thoughts, and step into the shining world of chivalry, where the air carries the clang of steel and the scent of polished leather. You're on a tournament field now, surrounded by knights in gleaming armor, their banners snapping in the breeze. You're here to question the gallant acts of these warriors, whose displays of valor, jousts, duels, and daring rescues were as much about romance as they were about honor. Chivalry's romantic facade promised devotion, but beneath the polished surface, motives tangled with ambition, lust, and power. You're about to probe the truth behind these shining ideals, where love and glory collided. Mainstream fact chivalry, formalized in the 12th century, was a code of conduct for knights, blending martial prowess with ideals of loyalty and courtly love. As seen in texts like those of Chrétien de Troyes, you're a squire polishing your knight's armor, watching him dedicate his joust to a lady in the stands, her ribbon tied to his lance. The crowd cheers, but you wonder if his devotion is pure or a performance for favor and fame. Chivalry's rules, like those of courtly love, we explored in that noble hall, demand he serve his lady with poetry and deeds. But the line between love and strategy blurs fast. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some knights wore their lady's sleeve or scarf into battle, a token meant to inspire courage, but sometimes just a sweaty rag by day's end. Picture you tying a lady's silk sleeve to your knight's arm, hoping it brings luck and not lice. Historians still argue whether these tokens were heartfelt gestures or calculated moves to curry favor with powerful families. You're standing by the lists. The crowds roar, shaking the ground as lances splinter. Your knight clad in steel bows, to his lady her smile, a prize worth more than gold. Chivalry paints him as her champion, risking life to prove his love. But you've seen him haggle for her father's support afterward. The tournament's a stage like the festival's dance floor, where romance is public and performative. His gallant act dedicating a win to her wins gasps, but you suspect he's eyeing her dowry as much as her eyes. You think of the royal court's scandals where love masked politics. Here, chivalry's just a shinier version. The church, that stern shadow from the chapel, blesses chivalry's ideals, loyalty, sacrifice, but squints at its romantic flair. Knights are meant to serve God, not ladies. Yet the two blend in tales. Like Lancelot's, you've heard priests grumble about knights who love too boldly their vows, teetering on sin. The lady's role is tricky too. She's a muse, like in courtly love, but her favor can shift alliances. You watch her hand him a glove, her gesture graceful, but calculated, and wonder if she's playing the same game. Joke number 1. Chivalric romance. It's like swiping right but with a horse and a higher chance of concussion. The setting's vibrant banners in crimson and gold, the scent of roasted meat drifting from nearby tents. Knights parade their armor clanking while squires like you scurry to keep them gleaming. The lady's dress, like those in the tailor's shop, is a weapon. Its low neckline and bright silk draw every eye, a silent challenge to her knight's honor. You've seen knights fight harder for a wealthy widow than a penniless maid their gallantry tied to gain. The crowd loves the show, but you notice the whispers gossip about a knight who rescued a lady for her land, not her heart. The risks are high. A failed joust could mean injury or shame. A lost favor could sink a knight's status. You've heard of knights banished for pushing chivalry too far, their devotion veering into the forest's illicit territory. The community nobles, squires, even peasants, watching from the edges, judges every move. You think of the town's matchmaking markets, where love was a deal. Here, it's a spectacle, with higher stakes and shinier props. A knight's gallant act might win a lady's smile, but it could also spark a rival's duel or a lord's wrath. Joke number 2. Chivalric devotion. Half the time, it's less my lady and more her daddy's castle. The truth behind chivalry's facade is murky. Some knights inspired by those mythic tales of Arthur truly loved their ladies risking all for a glance. Others used the code as a ladder climbing toward power. You watch your knight bow again, his lady's ribbon fluttering, and wonder if he's a romantic or a pragmatist. The lines as thin as the thread in that tailor's shop, and just as easy to snap. You recall the monk's silent struggles, the physician's starry cures. Chivalry's just another lens for desire polished to a heroic sheen. Joke number 3. Knightly romance. You're one lance tip away from glory, or a really bad headache. As the tournament's dust settles, the crowd thinning, you feel the weight of chivalry's contradictions. It was a dream of love and honor, but grounded in the gritty realities we've wandered through huts, courts, and shadowy alleys. You think back to the festival sparks, the myths, epic promises, the town's calculated glances. You tug the lady's ribbon into your belt. It's silk, soft, but heavy, and wonder how many knights rode into battle for love, and how many for something less noble. Wind down. The tournament fades now, its clamor softening as the world grows quiet under a velvet sky. You're back in your own bed, the modern world a gentle hum around you, but the echoes of medieval hearts linger. Those crowded huts, whispered vows, and daring jousts. They're not so far from us, are they? Love then, as now, was a tangle of hope, risk, and quiet moments, stolen from the chaos. Let the straw pallets, the lutes, the starry myths, drift away, their lessons tucked safe in your dreams. You're okay, safe in this moment, wrapped in the warmth of stories that still whisper across centuries. Close your eyes, let the night cradle you and rest, knowing love's old dance continues soft as a sigh.